My parents publicly humiliated me to favor my sister while I paid all the bills, so I left without warning, and what happened next shattered. They're illusions. I'm a 27-year-old guy. And for most of my life, my parents treated me like I existed only to fix their problems. It's strange to look back and realize how early it started, how natural it felt to carry everything because I was told that's what good sons do. I worked 2 jobs, dragging myself out of bed before sunrise for warehouse shifts and heading straight to evening deliveries afterward. Every paycheck I earned disappeared into rent, utilities, groceries, and whatever unexpected emergency my parents or sister threw at me. I didn't complain. I told myself this was what family meant. My sister Mia was the opposite of me in every way: charming, reckless, magnetic. She floated through life like the world owed her something. And somehow, with my parents, it always did. They praised her for things she didn't do, excused every mistake, and threw money at every disaster she created. She got the family car whenever she wanted. She got sympathy when she failed. She got attention just for showing up. Meanwhile, I was the one cleaning up the messes she left behind. Sometimes I'd hear my parents say things like, "Mia just needs time to find herself," or "she has so much potential." But when I needed time, when I needed help, when I was drowning in bills and exhaustion, I got silence or worse, guilt. "You're the responsible one," they'd remind me. "We depend on you," as if responsibility wasn't crushing me from the inside out. Still, I kept believing loyalty would eventually mean something. Maybe one day they'd look at me and see more than a walking wallet. Maybe they'd appreciate the sacrifices I made without ever asking for anything in return. But that illusion shattered the night of a cold family dinner I never should have gone to, and everything began to unravel from there. I walked into that family dinner still wearing my work boots, the smell of cardboard dust and engine oil clinging to my clothes. I hadn't had time to shower after my shift, but my parents insisted this dinner was important, so I showed up anyway. The restaurant was nicer than places we usually went, dim lighting, warm oak furniture, glasses that looked too thin to actually hold. As soon as I stepped in, I saw Mia in the center of the room like she was the guest of honor. She was dressed to impress, wearing a sparkly dress I knew she couldn't afford. Unless she'd used my card again, my mom rushed over, smiling too brightly. "Oh good, you made it. Try not to look so tired, okay? This is a big night for your sister." I blinked. "Big night? For what?" Mia tossed her hair and smirked. "Just celebrating my latest achievement, you know." Being an adult, she said it loud enough that the surrounding tables turned to look. My dad laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. As we sat down, the conversation quickly became a performance. My parents bragged about how Mia stepped up and paid the recent electricity bill. I felt my stomach twist because I was the one who paid it, like always. I tried staying quiet, but something inside me snapped. I looked up and said, "I paid that bill." The table fell silent for a moment before my mom waved her hand dismissively. "Don't start, please. We're trying to celebrate." Mia leaned forward with a smirk. "God, you're so dramatic. Can't you let me have one moment?" Relatives who barely knew me chuckled like I was the punchline to a joke. My dad whispered, "Don't ruin this for your sister," like I'd committed some kind of betrayal. I sat there, heat rising in my chest, realizing for the first time that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was who they were. And as the night continued, they showed me just how bad it could get. The days after that dinner felt heavier than usual, like something had shifted in the air. I tried brushing it off, telling myself maybe I overreacted. But my parents made sure to remind me that I hadn't imagined anything. They just doubled down. Suddenly, every small interaction felt like a transaction. If they called, it wasn't to ask how I was doing. It was, "Did you transfer the money?" Or, "We need you to cover this bill today." No greeting, no gratitude, just demands wrapped in fake urgency. Mia was worse. She walked around the house like she'd earned a crown, tossing out remarks like, "Must be hard being so bitter all the time," whenever I questioned anything. One afternoon, I overheard her telling my mom, "He's jealous because people actually like me." My mom didn't correct her. She didn't even hesitate. She just sighed and said, "He'll adjust. He always does." I started noticing another pattern, my parents forgetting to pay the bills they were responsible for. When I asked my dad why the water bill was overdue, he shrugged and said, "You can cover it, right? Mia's going through a lot." going through a lot. She spent her days sleeping in, shopping, and posting photos about her busy lifestyle. I finally tried standing my ground. "I can't keep paying everything," I told them. "I'm barely managing my own expenses." My mom crossed her arms. "You're being ungrateful. Family supports each other." "Funny," I said, "because I don't feel very supported." Mia rolled her eyes. There he goes again, always the victim. Every conversation ended with them making me feel like the problem, like the responsible one was somehow the burden. I kept telling myself things would level out eventually, that they were stressed or overwhelmed. But then I stumbled across something that made my stomach drop, and made me realize the manipulation had only just begun. That evening, I decided to check my bank account, mostly out of habit. I'd been scrimping for years, putting every spare dollar into a small savings account I hoped would finally give me some breathing room, a car of my own, maybe a tiny apartment away from this chaos. But as I scrolled, my chest tightened. The balance was gone. Almost everything I'd saved over the past 5 years had disappeared. I froze, fingers hovering over the screen. My mom's voice echoed in my head. "Mia just needs a little help for her project. You'll understand." At first, I thought maybe I'd misread something, but then it hit me the truth. She hadn't borrowed a little help. She'd drained the account. All of it. And worse, she'd spent it on a lavish weekend trip with friends, posting every selfie online like she'd earned it herself. I confronted her quietly that night. "Mia, what did you do with my savings?" She laughed. "Oh, that. Don't make it a big deal. You always handle the bills anyway. I thought you'd be okay with it." My mom intervened almost instantly. "He's being dramatic, Mia. It's just a temporary loan. You're trying to help, and he's making it sound like a crime." I felt a rage unlike anything before, but also an odd emptiness. Not just betrayal, but disbelief. The people I trusted who claimed to love me had turned my hard-earned money into a free ride for my sister. I tried to argue, to explain, to reason, but they weren't hearing me. They were hearing only the story Mia had rehearsed, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't just favoritism anymore, it was full-blown financial betrayal. I felt my chest tighten, stomach churning, my hands trembling slightly as I realized I had been a pawn in a game I didn't even know they were playing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to leave. But deep down, I knew leaving now would start a chain reaction I wasn't ready for yet. And so, I sat there, numb, staring at the empty balance, wondering, how far would they really go before I broke completely? The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a pit in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I tried to make sense of the missing savings, but every time I brought it up, my parents twisted the conversation. "You agreed to help Mia?" my mom said, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "You've always been the responsible one, so don't act like this is unfair." I blinked, trying to process her words. Agreed. I hadn't agreed to anything. I'd been silently footing the bills for years while they cheered my sister on. Mia, of course, played her part perfectly. She smiled at me, as if I was overreacting. "You're just too sensitive," she said, leaning against the kitchen counter. I thought you'd understand I needed it. Every time I tried to defend myself, they would nod along with her, confirming I was the one in the wrong. My dad even said, "We just want peace in the family. Stop making mountains out of molehills." Peace. It felt like betrayal disguised as normalcy. The gaslighting didn't stop at words. They began rewriting my history, telling relatives that I had been mean to Mia, that I had never supported her dreams, and that I was somehow ungrateful for the family they provided. Every phone call, every text from extended family carried subtle digs. "Mia is trying so hard," one aunt wrote. "You should learn from her dedication." I felt cornered, like I was being painted as the villain in my own life. Even my own friends noticed the change. When I tried venting, I found myself hesitating, unsure if I sounded paranoid. The sense of reality I'd relied on was slipping away. It was exhausting, isolating, and deeply infuriating. And then, late one night, scrolling through social media while trying to distract myself, I saw it. Mia had posted photos of the amazing weekend funded entirely by the money I'd worked so hard to save. Smiling faces, cocktails, selfies with captions like, "Living my best life." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. They weren't just enabling her. They were complicit. And in that moment, I knew something had to change, or I would lose myself entirely, but I didn't know just how far their manipulation would go. It all came to a head during what was supposed to be a casual family gathering at my parents' house. I walked in tired from another double shift, my arms carrying a tray of appetizers, expecting the usual passive-aggressive comments, but nothing prepared me for what came next. Almost immediately, my dad started in on me, loudly announcing to everyone in the living room, "Well, at least Mia is financially responsible." Unlike some people we know, I froze mid-step, the tray slipping slightly in my hands. Mia's laugh echoed across the room, high-pitched and cruel. "Yeah, seriously. How do you even survive day to day? I can't imagine being so basic." The relatives nearby chuckled awkwardly, some shifting uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene. My mom, who I'd hoped might step in, just smiled faintly and added, "We've tried to explain responsibility to him, but it seems he doesn't get it." I felt a hot wave of shame and fury hit at the same time. Every bill I'd covered, every sacrifice I'd made, suddenly vanished in their narrative. They made it seem like I was failing, like I had never done anything for the family. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but the words felt small and pointless against their collective judgment. Mia leaned forward, mock sympathy dripping from her voice. "Poor thing. You've been working so hard for nothing. Maybe next time, think before trying to act like an adult." Her smirk was a dagger, and I felt my heart pound in my chest. Every ounce of patience I'd clung to snapped. The room smelled faintly of burnt candles and the lingering scent of her perfume. And I felt dizzy, like I might actually pass out from anger and exhaustion. All the resentment, all the quiet suffering, all the humiliation I'd endured, their mockery in front of everyone coalesced into a single, overwhelming feeling I had to leave. That night, as I lay in bed replaying every cruel word and laugh, I realized something terrifying and liberating at the same time. It wasn't just hurt I was trapped, and if I didn't act, I would be trapped forever. And in that realization, a plan began forming in my mind, one they would never see coming. After that night, I stopped pretending. I went about my routine with a careful, calculated quietness that felt foreign but necessary. I started hiding small amounts of cash, funneling paychecks into a separate account no one knew about. Every receipt, every bill, every payment I'd made over the years, I copied them all and stored them digitally, knowing I would need proof one day. I couldn't trust anyone in that house anymore. Even my own sacrifices had been weaponized against me. I began scouting apartments online, choosing a place far enough that my parents wouldn't casually drop by. I spent hours comparing costs, floor plans, and commute times, imagining the life I might finally have if I could leave without warning. It wasn't just about escaping humiliation anymore. It was about reclaiming control over my own existence. I pictured a small, quiet space with a little kitchen and a bed I could actually relax on, without fear of judgment or guilt. Mia, of course, didn't notice. She continued flaunting her latest purchases on social media, oblivious to the fact that all of it had been funded by the money I worked so hard to earn. Whenever my parents called, I answered carefully, deflecting questions, pretending to be as compliant as ever. "I'll see what I can do," I would say. "Of course, I understand." And yet, inside I was counting days until I could break free completely. I packed slowly, little by little, so that if anyone looked in my room, nothing seemed amiss. I even kept paying a few bills under the guise of responsibility so the household wouldn't immediately notice the shift. Every late-night hour spent planning, saving, and hiding felt like laying down bricks in the foundation of my escape. And as I zipped the final box, my heart pounded with anticipation and fear. I knew that the moment I walked out, everything would change. Their little world of control, their favorite daughter, their endless manipulation, it was all about to collide with reality. But I didn't yet know how explosive that collision would be. A week after, I quietly stopped covering the bills. The house started falling apart in ways I had predicted but hadn't fully imagined. The electricity went out first, followed by the water, then the heating. My parents panicked, running around frantically like children, calling me "Why aren't you helping?" My mom yelled into the phone, "You're leaving us stranded." My stomach twisted. Listening to them, hearing panic in their voices was oddly satisfying, but also bittersweet. Mia was the first to lose her composure publicly. She stormed around the house, screaming at anyone who dare question her. "He's sabotaging everything. I can't believe he'd do this to me." She threw dishes across the kitchen in a fit, shattering plates that had been in the family for years. I listened to voicemails piling up as they begged, cajoled, and guilt-tripped me simultaneously. "You'll regret this," my dad warned. "You're destroying your family." I felt a crushing mix of guilt and liberation. This was exactly the chaos I'd tried to avoid by being responsible for everything. But now, watching it unfold without my hand in it, I realized they had created their own collapse. My chest tightened as I realized how completely dependent they had become on me. It was suffocating and maddening all at once. Even extended family started noticing cracks. Relatives who had always praised Mia's independence were now whispering, asking questions, and casting glances at my parents with a mix of judgment and disbelief. The walls of manipulation and favoritism they had built around themselves were crumbling, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. I sat alone in my apartment that night, staring at the ceiling, exhausted but oddly exhilarated. I felt like I was witnessing the slow-motion collapse of a world I'd long been trapped in. I had hit my emotional rock bottom, knowing fully the pain they would feel, but also realizing I could no longer carry it for them. And as I scrolled through social media, I saw Mia posting another triumphant selfie, completely unaware that the life she flaunted was about to unravel without me. The day it all came to light, I felt a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. I had stayed quiet, letting them flounder, but I knew the truth deserved to be seen. In black and white, beyond their twisted narratives, a cousin who had long been skeptical of Mia's so-called success finally sent me screenshots messages where she bragged about using my money, receipts proving she never paid a single bill herself, and photos of the weekend getaway I had unknowingly funded. I sat at my kitchen table, heart hammering, as I compiled everything into a single message. Bank statements, receipts, screenshots were precisely organized. With a deep breath, I sent it to the family group chat. My fingers shook slightly as I typed, "Here's the proof of everything I've done for this family. Check the facts before you judge." Almost instantly, the phone exploded with notifications. Messages poured in from relatives I hadn't heard from in months. Confusion, shock, and finally disbelief. "I can't believe it," one aunt wrote. "This changes everything," said another. I felt a strange vindication seeing their realization unfold. Mia's face appeared in the chat, initially smug, then pale as the receipts and bank statements dismantled the story she had carefully curated for years. This isn't fair," she typed, her confidence crumbling. My parents tried desperately to spin it again, calling me dramatic, saying I misunderstood. But the evidence was undeniable. For the first time in years, I wasn't the villain. I wasn't the one being laughed at. The family who had humiliated me, who had manipulated me, was finally confronted with the raw, unfiltered truth. Even better, relatives who had silently questioned Mia's behavior began openly supporting me, asking my parents why they had allowed this to go on. I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders, the suffocating responsibility finally easing. But this was just the beginning of the reckoning. I knew the confrontation I had avoided for years was coming and they would never see it the way I had imagined. I waited a few days, letting the shock from the truth explosion simmer before making my move. When I finally walked into the house, it was quiet to quiet. The air smelled faintly of burnt candles and lingering anxiety, like the house itself knew something had shifted. My parents were hovering near the kitchen, glancing at each other with nervous energy. Mia was sitting on the couch, scrolling her phone, pretending she hadn't just been caught in her lies. I took a deep breath and spoke calmly, each word deliberate. "I came to talk because it's time you understand something." They both stiffened. "I've moved out, permanently." Silence. "The kind that presses against your EARD-RUMS. "Wait, what do you mean?" "The bills you can't just—" "I can," I said, my voice steady. "I won't be paying your bills anymore. I won't be covering Mia's mistakes. I'm done being the family's financial mule." Mia's face turned red, her fingers clutching her phone like a lifeline. "You can't do this. You're supposed to fix everything." I shook my head. I'd been fixing everything for years, and what did it get me? Humiliation, lies, gaslighting. I'm done. My dad's face went pale, realization finally sinking in. You can't leave like this. Our whole life depends on you. I stepped closer, letting the weight of my words settle. Our life, or your illusions? You treated me like a paycheck, like I was disposable, like I existed only to prop up Mia. That ends now. Mia's voice cracked. You're just leaving us like this. Yes, I said. I'm leaving, and I'm never coming back to be part of this charade. The room went silent again, heavier this time, their faces frozen in disbelief and panic. Finally reflected what I'd felt for years, the consequences of their favoritism, their lies, their manipulation. And as I turned to walk out, I realized something satisfying and terrifying. I had finally broken free. But I knew, deep down, the aftermath of my departure would be a reckoning they could never ignore in the days and weeks after I left. The house began unraveling in ways I had quietly predicted. Without my support, bills went unpaid, late notices piled up, and the stress that my parents had always masked with blame and control became impossible to hide. The house that once seemed stable now felt like a fragile facade, trembling under the weight of their own mistakes. Mia tried to keep up appearances on social media, but the photos were no one believed the narrative of her independence anymore. Relatives started reaching out, asking questions they had never dared to before. How could this happen? They whispered in private messages. Why didn't anyone tell us? Slowly, the truth about who had actually been carrying the family for years began to spread. My parents, once so confident in their control, were suddenly isolated, their credibility crumbling. Mia's charm evaporated under scrutiny. The lavish lifestyle she had flaunted paid for by my work, my money. My sacrifices was now exposed for the hollow fantasy it had always been. She reached out to me, begging for explanations, trying to spin her story yet again. But the apology in her messages rang hollow even to my own ears. My parents, meanwhile, oscillated between panic and denial. They sent long, desperate texts, claiming regret, promising change, and hinting at reconciliation. I realized that no apology could undo years of being dismissed, humiliated, and exploited sitting in my small apartment. I watched the chaos from a safe distance, feeling a mix of vindication and sorrow. For the first time, I could breathe without guilt pressing down on my chest. The family that had thrived on favoritism and deception was finally facing the consequences of its own making. And as I reflected on everything that had transpired, I understood something profound. Leaving had not just been an escape, it had become the most powerful form of justice. But what came next would test them in ways they never expected. Months later, I finally felt the weight lift entirely. My small apartment, modest, quiet, and entirely mine, was filled with the scent of fresh paint and a sense of freedom I hadn't known in decades. I cooked my own meals, made my own schedule, and for the first time, my hard work benefited only me. Each paycheck I earned went toward building a life I actually wanted, not one that existed to prop up someone else's illusions. I even started investing in the small side business I had dreamed of for years, the one I'd shelved because there was always another family emergency to cover. Seeing it grow, seeing results that were entirely mine, was intoxicating. For the first time, I understood what it meant to be empowered. To reclaim control over my own life, Mia tried to reach out again, messaging me with frantic apologies and pleas. I made a mistake. You have to help me. But I ignored them, feeling no urge to rescue someone who had thrived on exploiting me. My parents sent long, desperate letters, full of guilt and regret, admitting they'd taken me for granted, but I could tell their apologies were born of humiliation, not true understanding sometimes. I think about the irony. They always wanted me to be responsible, to carry them, to fix everything. By finally stepping away, I had done more for myself than I ever could have done by staying. And in the process, the facade they built, the perfect daughter, the obedient son, the flawless family, crumbled spectacularly. I finally allowed myself to smile without guilt. I could walk down the street knowing my life was mine alone, free from manipulation, favoritism, and betrayal. The freedom, the quiet satisfaction, and the empowerment I now felt were far sweeter than any revenge I could have enacted directly. At night, I think about them, trapped in the consequences they created, and I feel a strange, calm satisfaction. The most powerful revenge wasn't confrontation, yelling, or payback. It was simply walking away and building a life they could never touch. And with that, I finally knew peace.